My intense attraction to my nephew began when he came to stay with us for a month. Let me tell you how I tempted him, until he finally gave in. My name is Jennifer. I'm 37, and my 45-year-old husband, Carlos, and I live in a large house in the beautiful city of Florianopolis. We have a good marriage, but since Carlos is a truck driver and frequently away, I often find myself feeling alone. My sister asked if her 23-year-old son, Christian, my nephew, could stay with us while preparing for a military test. Carlos, always kind, agreed immediately. When Christian arrived, I was shocked by how much he'd matured. He was no longer a child, but a handsome, muscular young man. I greeted him with a playful comment about his good looks and popularity with women. He modestly replied that he was too focused on his studies and training to think about girls. His dedicated attitude intrigued me, and I started to feel a growing attraction to him. He was unique compared to other men his age, and this difference captivated me. That same week, Carlos left for another work trip. Once more, it was only Christian and I at home. Christian hadn't realized it, but I was already trying to get his attention. I had a secret plan, something new and thrilling that I was putting into action. I was excited to see what might occur with Carlos, gone for his job. With just Christian and myself in the house, on the first day of Carlos's absence, I made a simple midday meal. While cooking, I felt more anxious than normal. Being around my nephew, now a grown man, made me slightly uncomfortable, although I wouldn't confess it to myself. For lunch, I wore a see-through outfit, a little more daring than I typically wore. I wanted to observe his response, maybe just out of plain nosiness. When Christian entered the kitchen to assist me, I saw him trying to be very courteous, but his gaze kept returning to me. Is this outfit too revealing? I apologize if it is. I'm just accustomed to dressing comfortably at home, I inquired casually while setting the table. Christian, a little taken aback by my question, smiled. My aunt told me I looked good, and we had a casual lunch. We discussed his upcoming exam and his workout schedule. I complimented him on his physique, saying he looked like someone on TV. He appreciated the compliment and said he'd been working hard. He then returned the compliment, asking if I'd been exercising because I looked fit. I laughed and said I'd always been that way, and my husband liked it. From that point, things began to shift subtly. My nephew seemed more aware of me, but he remained polite and didn't comment. The week went by smoothly. My husband, Carlos, was still away, and I became more preoccupied with how to attract Christian. One afternoon, after we ate, I decided to do the dishes and asked Christian to assist. He entered the kitchen quietly and politely, ready to help. I asked him to dry the dishes while I washed them. I wash, I asked, handing him a dish towel. He agreed and began working beside me. As we washed, the conversation was casual, nothing special. We talked about everyday things, how he was adapting to life in the city, and how his preparation for the exam was going. But I noticed that every now and then he would glance at the curves my top didn't cover, and I kept wondering if I was attracting him in some way. That's when I deliberately dropped a spoon on the floor, pretending I didn't know what I was doing. I bent down slowly to pick it up as I crouched. I felt Christian's piercing gaze on me. I didn't need to look at him to know he was flustered and staring at what I was showing. I stood up with the spoon in hand and continued washing the dishes as if nothing had happened. But I noticed that Christian was different. He was quieter, a bit more nervous. Perhaps he tried to hide it, but I could tell he was fidgeting with his hands as if something was bothering him in his pocket. Is something wrong, Christian? I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked at me, a bit surprised by the question, and quickly replied, "No, nothing, Auntie." I'm just thinking about the training. I smiled at him and said he didn't need to worry so much, that he was doing well, and everything would work out fine. We finished washing the dishes in silence, and I noticed that the atmosphere between us had changed. Christian was clearly uncomfortable, and I knew that part of it was because of me, which was exactly what I wanted that night. As I laid down to sleep, I thought about what had happened. It wasn't just a simple tease. It was a new feeling, maybe a little dangerous, but at the same time it made me curious to see what else might happen that night. After a seemingly ordinary day, I felt a restlessness within me. The fire that had been building up over the past few days was becoming impossible to extinguish. After making sure everything was in order in the house, I decided to go to Christian's room to see if he needed anything. As I approached the door, I heard him talking on the phone. I pressed my ear against the door, curious, not wanting to invade his privacy, but at the same time, unable to resist. What I heard made my heart race. Man, my aunt. You wouldn't believe it. She is amazing. It feels like she's testing me. I don't know if I can resist much longer, he said in a tone that mixed excitement and nervousness. My cheeks flushed as I heard that I knew I was playing with fire. But what he said on the phone made me realize that Christian was no longer the boy I knew, but a man struggling with his own desires. Something inside me ignited. The curiosity was now different, more intense. I decided not to enter the room at that moment, but what I heard kept replaying in my mind. It was obvious that he was feeling attracted to me, and the thought of that excited me more than it should have. I returned to my room, but I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed, imagining what it would be like if I decided to take things a little further. The following night, I passed by Christian's room again, and once more, I heard his voice on the phone. She won't stop, man. I don't know what to do. Just thinking about her drives me crazy this time. The desire in his voice was clear. It is time. The desire in his voice was clear. Knew I was about to cross a line. I stayed there listening, and when he hung up the phone, I waited a few minutes before leaving. I watched for a moment in silence, and then went back to my room. I didn't want to rush things, but I liked the idea that he was thinking of me in that way that night. I lay in bed with a smile on my face, knowing the game was just beginning. It was about the power I had over him, and how it made me feel alive again. It was time to see how far this game could go. One day, I decided to take a long, relaxing bath. When I entered the bathroom, I realized I had forgotten my towel in the bedroom. I smiled, knowing it was the perfect excuse. I called out to Christian in a sweet voice, asking him to bring the towel to me. "It's on my bed. Could you grab it for me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Christian, always polite, quickly went to fetch it. When he reached the bathroom door, I said, "You can come in, Christian, if I step out like this. I'll get the whole floor wet," in an innocent tone. He hesitated for a moment, but then entered, extending the towel to me. Without looking directly at me, I noticed how nervous he was becoming, almost trembling, while at the same time trying to keep his composure. When I took the towel from his hands, our eyes finally met, and it felt like time had stopped. For a second, I was wrapped only in the steam of the bath, feeling the warmth of the water and the intensity of the situation. He quickly averted his gaze, embarrassed, and muttered something about needing to leave as he turned to go. I couldn't resist teasing him a bit more. "Thank you, dear. I hope I didn't bother you," I said softly, watching the nervousness on my nephew's face. Christian nodded, unable to respond properly, and quickly left the bathroom, closing the door behind him. As soon as he was gone, I leaned against the wall, feeling my heart race. I knew I was getting to him, but it was also affecting me. As I tried to sleep, I imagined what was going through Christian's mind at that moment. Was he also struggling with his own desires, just like I was? The thought that he might be thinking of me in that way made me smile. Perhaps it was time to take the next step. but carefully to avoid going too far. It was late, and after a rather quiet day, I decided it was time to see how far Christian was willing to go dressed in a light nightgown. I walked into the living room, where he was sitting on the couch focused on something on the TV, without saying a word. I passed by him, feeling his eyes follow me. I stopped at the kitchen door with the excuse of getting a glass of water. Christian, "It's late. Don't you want to rest a little?" I asked in a low, soft voice. "I'm not sleepy, Auntie. I think I'll stay here a bit." "Longer," he replied, trying to sound calm, but I knew he was nervous. "Well, I'm going to bed if you need anything. I'll be in my room," I said, leaving the question in the air as I reached the door. I looked back one last time, catching Christian watching me closely. His eyes couldn't look away from me later. That night, I couldn't sleep. What had happened during the day was still fresh in my mind. I got out of bed and walked silently down the hallway to my nephew's room. I stopped in front of the closed door, listening to the soft sound of his breathing. I knocked lightly, and he, with a somewhat sleepy voice, asked me to come in shortly after. When I entered, Christian was lying in bed, covered up to his waist, but visibly awake. I couldn't sleep. I said in a low voice, sitting on the edge of the bed, "I was thinking about how you haven't been talking much with me. Is everything okay?" My dear Christian's voice betrayed the calm he was trying to maintain. "Yes, Auntie. It's just that I don't know sometimes. I feel a bit lost. I want to go out to parties, but I need to focus on my studies." "I understand," I replied gently, placing my hand on his. "Sometimes, when we're alone, feelings become more intense. But you don't need to worry." The touch of my hand seemed to calm him, yet at the same time excite my nephew even more. I could see in his eyes that he was fighting against that desire. "You're special to me. Christian, I just want you to know that I'm sorry if I sometimes wear very sensual clothes. I feel more comfortable that way. If it bothers you, I can dress appropriately. I know that men's minds think a lot of naughty things even about their aunt," I said, laughing nervously. He looked at me with a mixture of relief and desire. "I don't mind at all, Aunt Jennifer. But it's like you said, a man, when he sees a woman like you, he gets excited right away, regardless of her being his aunt." And in that moment, I knew the game was about to begin, but it wasn't time to move forward. Yet, I slowly pulled away and stood up, letting my hand slide across his good night. "Dear sleep." "Well," I murmured before leaving the room, "Carlos returned home for a few days, and with him, the sense of normally in our married life returned as it was before. But now there was something that only Christian and I shared: our connection. He was looking at me with more desire. The little provocations, the glances full of double meanings, all of it seemed to be waiting for the right moment. It was late afternoon, and we decided to have a barbecue to enjoy family time. Carlos and Christian were at the grill talking and laughing, while I was in the kitchen preparing the salad and rice. The scene seemed peaceful, but I felt a growing nervousness inside me. My nephew, who had until then maintained his composure around Carlos, now seemed more restless with the tension. As I was cutting the vegetables, I felt a presence behind me. I thought it was Carlos, but when I turned around, I saw it was Christian. He was close, very close. I could feel every muscle of him against me. When he leaned forward a little more, my heart raced with a smile on his face. He whispered, "Aunt, do you need help with that?" For a moment, I was speechless. "No, I'm fine. But what are you doing here? Your uncle won't like seeing you away from the grill," I replied, trying to stay calm. But my voice was a little shaky. Christian smiled that smile I knew so well, and replied in a low voice, almost a whisper, "He's busy with the meat. He won't notice if I give a little help around here." There was something in the way he said it that made my stomach churn with excitement and nervousness. He stayed there close to me while I continued to cut the vegetables, trying to concentrate, but it was impossible to ignore his proximity, the warmth of his body so close to mine. You're provoking me, aren't you, just like I did to you? I asked, half joking and a little nervous. Maybe, but just a little. He replied in a tone of voice that was both playful and serious. He stepped away before the situation could get bolder, returning to the grill beside Carlos, who had no idea what was happening in the kitchen. I stayed there alone, trying to regain control of the situation and my own thoughts. Later during dinner, the heated glances between Christian and me continued. Carlos, for his part, noticed nothing completely. Oblivious to what was happening between us, with Carlos away on another trip, the house became quiet again, leaving room for us and for the provocations between Christian and me to intensify. Late one night, after a relaxing bath, I went to my room. I put on a silk nightgown, short and soft to the touch. I went to my room. I put on a silk nightgown, lay down on the bed, but couldn't sleep. I knew Christian was in the next room, probably as restless as I was. The idea that he might be thinking about me, just as I was thinking about me, just as I was thinking about him, made me smile. I got up quietly and walked to the door of my room. I paused there for a moment, but soon made up my mind with light steps. I went to Christian's room and knocked softly on the door. "Come in." I heard his voice, a little surprised, when I opened the door. I found him sitting on the bed, shirtless, the muscles of his body reflecting in the light there. There was something in his eyes that drew me in, a mixture of desire. I couldn't sleep. "Maybe I just need a little company," I said, my voice coming out lower than I intended. Christian looked at me for a moment, assessing the situation before replying. I was also awake. His eyes traveled down my body, appreciating the sight, and I felt the heat grow between us. I slowly approached, stopping beside the bed. "Can I sit down?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. He just nodded, making a yes gesture. When I sat down beside him, the proximity made the excitement peak. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew I was about to cross the line. "My dear, do you want to play with me today as a celebration of your score on the theoretical test?" I said to him. Dying of excitement, he replied to me in a still, firm voice. "That's what I want most, Aunt Jennifer. You provoked me a lot now. Let me enjoy a little. Don't be mean to me. Don't worry, my dear. You can enjoy it until the day you leave. I'll be your reward now. You'll work very hard to pass the physical test soon after we kissed for a long time." I've never felt so relieved when we finished. Christian said, "Now I know why Uncle Carlos is with you, Aunt Jennifer." I replied, saying that Carlos didn't take advantage of those curves at all. And with that, I have to hunt for fun on the street, but with him. Here at home, everything was perfect for me. The days passed and Carlos was still away. The house, which used to seem like a place of refuge, was now a playground where every word carried a double meaning. Until then. Carlos returns from his trip, missing the bar. He went running to have a few drinks. While I was preparing his dinner, Christian comes from behind with that usual volume. "Calm down, love. Your uncle is here today. Leave the bedroom door open, and I'll be there at midnight. Okay," he said in a calm voice, giving 2 kisses on his face. "It's just that, Aunt Clara, now that I've tasted did. I can't control the urge to have you drive me crazy." My nephew replied, burning with heat, so he kissed me and went to the living room. Carlos returned home, and after everyone had dinner, it was time to sleep. So when it was midnight and Carlos had fallen asleep from drinking so much, I went to my nephew's room. He was already prepared and ready to receive me as soon as I entered. I locked the door and started breaking the ice. "Your body is so strong and hard, my love, and that piece of yours makes me shiver all over." Christian, struggling to hold back the urge to kiss me, asked, "Are you sure the coot is already asleep, Aunt? I don't want him to interrupt our game." I gave him 2 kisses and replied, "Don't worry, my love. I'm only yours." So we kissed for 2 hours. Then I decided to go back to bed so as not to worry my husband about anything. Christian kissed me and said that my husband doesn't know what he's missing and continued saying, "Don't worry, he doesn't do what I do." Aunt Jennifer replied with a loving look, "Your uncle is going to travel in the last week of the month, my dear. And this will be your last week here, too. Let's make the most of it." Carlos left the following morning at dawn. He said goodbye to me, and as soon as he started the truck, I went to open the door to go to Christian's. Suddenly, I heard knocks on the door. It was him asking to come in. I opened the door, and then he said to me, "Today I wanted to be here in this room and on this bed, Aunt, to leave my mark." What do you think? I was only wearing a top when I replied, "Honey, this week, I want you to leave your mark all over the house. I want you to leave every memory you can. Don't hold back." As soon as I finished saying that, he came towards me and started kissing me with all that youthful passion, whispering, "This is the best trip of my whole life. Thank you, Aunt Clara." We played around all night and slept right. There, the next day, my nephew was out taking the final exam for the contest. When I went to the market and came back, he was already fast asleep from exhaustion, so I decided not to disturb his sleep and let him rest enough, because he would be more tired. With me in the coming days, then with the exam, we had a relationship for the whole week until he returned to his city, and when the day came to leave, I thanked him for every moment we had lived that month. "I'm surprised by you, Christian, today. You've officially become my favorite nephew," I said, laughing, with double meaning. So he replied, "Aunt Jennifer, thank you for the time I spent here. It was a great learning experience for me. And if everything works out, can I come back? Because if I start working, it will be here in Florianopolis, so I could stay here at your place for a long time, but only if you want me to. Of course, honey, my door is always open. I'd love to have more fun with you." We didn't have much fun. We could be even bolder. We talked for a long time, until he finally left. I'm still waiting for him to text me to confirm the day he's coming. I've already told Carlos, and he said, without any problem, that Christian could stay here at home. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment, and leave a like.